the president of the Oxford Union, Charlie, was invited to speak at the Oxford Union. I got an invite to speak at the Oxford Union not that long ago. And it's a similar, it's a debate society. We have some here. There's the Yale Political Union. It's a formal debate society where you're supposed to have civilized people following Robert's Rules of Order, debating topics. Charlie did a great job at the Oxford Union. Here is what the president of the Oxford Union had to say. George Abaranani or something. He says, all caps, Charlie Kirk got shot. Let's effing go. Prayers up. Prayers up for his being shot. Not to help him and protect him as he was shot, but celebrating the fact. Thank you, God, that he was shot. Lest there be any confusion, here is George Abaranani describing his views of political violence in extreme detail at the Oxford Union.
To effectively create change in the world we desire. And side prop will argue that at times there is simply nothing else that can be required other than violent retaliation. And this is a view I wholeheartedly agree with. The view that some institutions are too broken, too aggressive, too oppressive to be reformed. Like cancers of our society, they must and they should be taken down by any means necessary.
Is that ambiguous too, New York Times? You're going to write a bit? It's just his message is so unclear. The president of the Oxford Union, when he said that he wholeheartedly supports political violence against people on the right, I just don't know what he could possibly mean. This is jarring for a lot of people because of two things. One, that guy is technically elite. I know it's absurd that he walks into the Oxford Union wearing a do-rag. It's absurd that he was admitted to Oxford. It's absurd that he is tolerated in polite society. But he is. He's in there wearing something vaguely resembling a tuxedo. He's the president of the Oxford Union, and he's defending calls for violence against ordinary right-wingers. And then he's celebrating when Charlie Kirk, the most mainstream right-wing talker and debater in the world, was murdered. And he is in the elite institutions. That's the first reason. The second thing that is really jarring for a lot of people is this guy knew Charlie Kirk, because this guy showed up to debate Charlie wearing a sweatsuit or something. Again, just tells you a lot about our institutions. But he showed up. Now, this was, I don't think at the Oxford, maybe this was at the Cambridge Union. I can't quite tell. But he met the guy. He knew the guy. And this is what's really striking a lot of people. Charlie, look, obviously a lot of us knew Charlie and a lot of us were friends with Charlie. Charlie had a lot of friends, but some of us have known him for many, many years. And so you think, all right, man, this has been really tough on people because, I don't know, he's a friend of ours. No, that's not why. That's part of it for some of us, but that's not why. It's I think mostly the reaction. The fact that people we know, family members, friends, people we grew up with, people we work with, do not merely hate the way we vote. Do not merely say nasty things about us. Do not merely even call us hyperbolic terms like Nazis and Hitler or whatever. Though those things are related, I guess. They want us dead. They're saying they want us dead. I'm not reading the tea leaves. The message is not ambiguous. They want us dead. They would be happy if we were murdered. They would celebrate that, actually. And I don't even think that they realize what they've done. Maybe some of them do and they don't care, but others, I don't think they do. I remember years and years ago, Ann Coulter came to campus. I was in college. And some of my friends were going off about how much they hated Ann Coulter and how she was evil and calling her all sorts of terrible names. And I said, there's really not much difference between me and Ann Coulter. I said, no, Michael, it's totally ridiculous. I said, no, we kind of basically believe the same things. The only difference is she's famous and I'm not famous. And they kind of laughed it off or whatever. They just wouldn't confront that fact. And that's really it, especially when you're talking about Charlie Kirk, who was much more moderate than Ann, who was much more measured and centrist than Ann, or than really anybody on the right. Because then the only answer that the left can have your friends, your family, and your coworkers is, no, we're happy that this guy got murdered, but we wouldn't want you to be murdered. We wouldn't be happy if you were murdered. I mean, yeah, we're happy he got murdered because of his beliefs, but no, there's a big difference between you and him. He says his beliefs out loud. That's the only difference. The only difference between Charlie Kirk and half this country is he had the guts to say it out loud, to state his moderate, normal, common sense views out loud. And they murdered him for that. And implicit in the broad, public, elite attempt to justify and explain away and shrug off and even celebrate his murder, implicit in all of that is a threat. You shut your mouth or you're next, and we'll cheer it on. We'll dance on your grave. That's what's implicit. And that is 60% of the national trauma around Charlie Kirk's death. The realization, the undeniable, I'm sorry to say, realization. I try to give every grace I possibly can to the other side. I try to see things from the other side's point of view. I don't want to straw man anyone. I know Charlie was very gracious to the other side. And yet it's just undeniable. It's just the New York Times and it's CNN and it's The Nation and it's the Reuters and it's the head of the Oxford Union. And it's all of this saying, no, we really do want you dead. No, we really do. What he said does justify his death. Well, he was divisive. He was controversial. You better not be. So what do we do in the face of all of that? I have an idea, which is quite common sense, and I think generally popular. Some don't agree with it, but I think it's the only thing we can do, and it is what's happening right now. It is not possible to have an open marketplace of ideas when people shoot up the marketplace. I made this point on the show on Thursday or Friday. I posted a column to X about this that went pretty viral. This is not a particularly radical opinion. This is a pretty moderate opinion that has been the standard understanding of politics for a very, very long time. But it's lost on some people now. I don't know why. Maybe people are too ideological in their thinking. Maybe they've just been sloganeering I don't know. But we like healthy and robust debate. That's a really good thing. America has a great, wonderful tradition of that. And we sometimes use this phrase, the marketplace of ideas, to describe it. And I think that's actually an apt analogy. It's an apt picture because marketplaces are great and there's wonderful exchange and it can lead to flourishing and mutual enrichment. But marketplaces have to have rules. There have to be some rules. You need to have common media of exchange. You have to have trust in the marketplace. You need to have some security in the marketplace. You need to have rules that regulate the commerce in the marketplace. When people undermine all of that, you cannot have a marketplace. You cannot have, to use a phrase from G.K. Chesterton, the thought that stops thought. We have a wonderfully open and healthy society in America, at least in principle. But society is circumscribed by things like the Constitution, by the ideas articulated in the Declaration of Independence, by morality and religion, as the framers told us explicitly and repeatedly, that the Constitution does not work to govern an immoral and an irreligious people, and many other such statements. So, yes, we have a relatively open society, but it can only remain relatively open within certain constraints. If you undermine those constraints, your society commits suicide. That's what we're seeing here in the marketplace of ideas. If you enter into the marketplace of ideas and say, we're going to shoot all of you if you disagree with me, you have not expanded the marketplace of ideas. You have not contributed to the marketplace of ideas. You have fundamentally undermined it. So even if you are a defender of the free marketplace of ideas, it is a fundamentally incoherent view to say that we should tolerate this kind of stuff. And just as a purely practical political matter, we cannot continue as a country if half the country openly wants to murder the other half and openly celebrates the murder of the other half merely for expressing opinions, especially for expressing very moderate and centrist opinions. It is not possible to go on that way. You will not have the social trust that is requisite to have a country. This is an urgent, urgent problem. It's actually an existential problem. Something has to be done about this. I cannot go into a restaurant if I believe that the kitchen staff with the crazy colored hair and the wearing all the weird stuff and the crazy flags and everything, if I believe that person in the kitchen is going to poison my food because that person in the kitchen wants to murder me because half the country wants to murder me for holding normal ideas, we can't have restaurants. If I believe that I go into a workplace and my coworker is salivating at the prospect of murdering everyone to the right of Hillary Clinton and celebrating that and calling for that and threatening that, then we can't have workplaces. We can't have a country under those conditions, much less a free marketplace of ideas. So what must be done first is not, as some people are calling, merely to redouble our devotion to the free marketplace of ideas. Maybe you can get to that eventually if you really want to. But what must be done now is to reassert order. Order is not contrary to liberty. It's not contrary to freedom. It's not contrary to the exchange of ideas. It is the prerequisite for those things. Liberty requires order. You cannot simultaneously be free and ignorant. You cannot simultaneously be free and undisciplined. This is why we do not let toddlers vote. We all recognize this. Not only the founders and the framers, but every even semi-reasonable person. We behave as though that is true all day long. We must have order. And I'll put that into really practical terms. There need to be consequences for undermining the whole system. People who go out and say that ordinary, normal conservatives should be murdered wholesale and the streets should soak in their blood, those people need to be ostracized from society. They should be corrected first in charity and graciousness if they refuse to behave as they ought in the most basic ways that civilized people have to behave. If they persist in particularly antisocial behaviors, if they persist in particularly suicidal ideologies, they need to be ostracized. And I'll make it even more practical. They need to lose their social standing. They should not be welcome into polite society. And in some cases, they should lose their jobs. We didn't even get to all of the consequences that we're already beginning to see, but there are some hopeful signs. There are companies who are firing people for this, and they need to. They need to do it. And with any political reform, I think one should always err on the side of caution, err on the side of restraint. But I think a good place to start would be with people who are openly celebrating the murder of an innocent man whose only offense was expressing his opinion. And that is happening now. That is beginning to happen. Microsoft has said comments celebrating violence against anyone are unacceptable and do not align with our values. Office Depot said much the same thing. NASDAQ, Perkins Coie, a left-wing law firm, very prominent left-wing law firm, said that. This is not who we are. We've separated from the individual who was celebrating the murder. The Carolina Panthers, Delta Airlines has suspended employees over these kinds of social media posts. This is really, really important. And I don't want people to be confused by this, and I don't want them to be led astray by liberal ideologues, by the squishes. But ask yourself, what is the purpose of the open marketplace of ideas? You don't need to wonder that long. The people who promoted this very idea, going back to the Enlightenment, going back to the early days of liberalism, going back to writers like John Milton and John Locke, they tell you the purpose of the open marketplace of ideas is to arrive at the truth. The argument for the open marketplace of ideas is not just to amuse ourselves. It's not just to threaten everybody. It's not just to post funny memes. It's to arrive at the truth. The argument, and I'm not weighing in at all on whether this argument is convincing. I'm just saying the argument is that by having more and more voices in the public square, eventually the good ideas are going to win out over the bad ideas. And so then we're going to arrive at the truth. The means by which this occurs in the open marketplace of ideas is through debate. If you tolerate or even celebrate murder for debate, then you have fundamentally undermined the entire open marketplace of ideas. Do you understand that? This is what Chesterton means by the thought that stops thought. This is what the squishes and the very shallow people, even on the putative right, just don't seem to understand. The whole idea of the open marketplace of ideas is that we arrive at the truth through debate. If you tolerate celebrating murder for debate, you've undermined the whole thing. You haven't expanded you've committed ideological suicide. We can't have that. We need, these companies are doing a very good job by firing these people. In certain cases, in teachers, for instance, there was a teacher in Canada who showed the assassination video in 4K to a classroom of 10 and 11-year-olds and then justified it and celebrated it. These people need to lose their jobs. They need to face severe consequences. Law enforcement. President Trump, through Stephen Miller, very ably saying that the government will go after left-wing terror organizations. Antifa is an organized terror organization. They have anarchist bookshops. They make bombs. They practice shooting us. They attack us regularly. And in the case of Charlie, they succeeded. They need to be vigorously prosecuted. They need to be vigorously suppressed and run out of society. Not to undermine our liberty, as some ridiculous people are suggesting, but in order to preserve our liberty. The only way that you can possibly preserve liberty, the only way that you can possibly preserve a healthy exchange of ideas, the only way that you can possibly preserve a flourishing society is by suppressing the elements that undermine it. Antisocial, suicidal.